And as we always say, good morning, blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here on KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Don't forget our great debate watch party, our State of the Union party. We are very excited about that. That will be Tuesday, January 30th at Dave & Buster's. Looking forward to seeing everybody. For RSVPs, for reservations, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com for details. We would love to see you there. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a little pre-State of the Union party, then we're going to watch the State of the Union, and as we've done with our debate watch parties, then we'll go live on the air, and we will hear from you, so you don't have to talk back to your TV. Again, that is this Tuesday at Dave & Buster's from 6 to 9. Joining us now, starting our day the right way, our great friend, political analyst Steve Ackerman. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. Taking a look at the Idaho legislature, I mean, apparently the big story has to be the idea of semi-trucks going the same speed as cars, although I am wondering, what about the grocery tax repeal that was such a big story last year?
Yeah, and I know Senator Vick has talked about, a tax cut bill that either they're planning on putting forward to the governor or they've just done it. I think they're planning on doing it, and it does not include a grocery tax cut, which he and some others have argued, hey, we need to include that in there, and I agree. I think they should because, as we've talked quite a bit, it's a regressive tax. It has a bigger impact. In other words, if you cut the tax on groceries, you're helping people more at the lower income than you are at a higher income. And Idaho tends to be a lower wage state compared to the national average.
Well, it was such a big story last year. The governor repealed it once the legislature was out. Why not make that the first call at the line of scrimmage?
I agree. I think that's exactly what you do. And if we analogize to presidents and what they've done legislatively, the fact that the Trump administration was able to get a tax bill through in the first year, right? That was critical. You should do something in the first year, and as you talked about, this would really set a marker, for cutting taxes, especially given that we are looking at increasing the state budget. So we could have an honest conversation that if you cut taxes, you can raise revenue. So the government is going to get a lot of the revenue they're going to need. They don't always get all of it, but they'll get a lot of it. And if they're a little more careful on their spending, things will balance. So it's a good argument. I agree.
Indeed. Does this cause the rift between constituent and representative when we hear this?
You mean that they're not kind of following through?
Right, because again, for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm thinking to myself, this should be public item number one, since it was so popular with everybody but Governor Otter.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are. So if you're in Payette County, if you're in Washington County, if you're in Kootenai County, where you can go across a state border to a place where you can avoid a sales tax, then definitely. But if you're maybe more inland or if you're not as close to a border, then it may not have the same resonance. The other thing I would argue is this is a good example, and I was thinking about it the other day because I think it was Greg Pruitt when you interviewed Greg Pruitt the other day, and he made the comment about the Liberty legislators. Now, remember when you Tea Party Bob and I were in the studio and we coined the phrase Liberty legislators. This is a great opportunity for that group of Liberty legislators to tie together with leadership, with people in leadership, develop that relationship, and then help push that ball over the goal line, meaning this is something a lot of people across the aisle, including bipartisan, a lot of Democrats in the state legislature would support cutting the tax on groceries to help people at the lower income. So this is a great bill to pull a legislature together in a bipartisan way, and that more kind of maybe more establishment, traditional conservative, but also Liberty legislators can get a lot of people together. And frankly, those relationships are how you get things through.
Well, I think those legislators, those legislators and their relationships do need to be brought together. Our great friend Steve Ackerman is with us, political analyst now. Steve is working for the Russ Fulcher campaign. We'll talk a little bit about the congressional race as well. But, we've got this big story about Representative Crane. I think he's a great guy. I think he would have been an interesting competitor in the race for the first CD. Of course, his dad is the treasurer. We have people saying, oh, he's taping people. Come on, folks. This is Idaho, not Watergate. Your thoughts on whether or not this is a legitimate story or it's going to take us a break from, hey, there's a new stoplight on 10th Street.
Right. I don't think it's going to kind of blow up to a whole lot. In part because we have had a little bit of kind of recordings and tapings going on in our recent history the last few years, although not here at the Capitol. So I don't think it's gonna be as big an issue. I think it's going to kind of blow over, in part because of the timing. They have a lot that they want to get done, and they want to kind of get the momentum going. And so this could be kind of a derailment, and we don't want that. I'll be honest with you, I don't know a lot more about it than what I've read in the paper. So given that limited information, I'm going to say it's going to kind of blow over because they're going to want to move on their agenda.
Again, though, it's just, okay, maybe I'm too inside. If the representative wants to run tape to protect himself, I don't think that's a bad thing. Considering all the allegations are going on, am I missing something here? And again, I have the utmost respect for State Representative Crane. I think he's a great guy. Certainly he's pro-life. He's staunchly conservative, and maybe that's my bias here, but I'm looking at it and going, ooh, okay, that's a lot of inside baseball, but does it really move the meter?
Well, part of it is you're not sure what kind of his perspective and his relationships are in that, where he kind of felt that. And so, without having that, maybe he had something here. I'm not sure. I mean, that's, there were at least my time, spending time, in the Senate, in the House, being in the halls, they're pretty open. They're pretty open. There's a lot of good conversation. In general, people there, the legislators I've seen, and actually seen quite a number of them, they're pretty much open about their perspective. There's not a whole lot behind. Now there's always some, but that's part of the deal making.
Steve,
they're pretty open.
Steve, well, thank you for that. Steve Ackerman joining us here on KIDO Talk Radio. We always appreciate his insight, but I think the point I'm making, and maybe it's my paranoia, and you wouldn't know anything about me being paranoid or people that listen to this great program on KIDO Talk Radio, but if I were a legislator, and if I heard these allegations going around, especially what has happened recently, I would tape things just to try to protect myself. Sure. Again, that's my own opinion on this. I don't know if the majority of the vaunted Idaho Press Corps shares that view. Okay, let's move on to the race for governor. Obviously, this is going to be the most competitive primary ever. We've got the big three. We've got A.J. Belukoff. And by the way, we have sent out numerous requests to Mr. Belukoff's press person. Apparently, he's too busy. But we will be, and A.J., he's very amenable. And, we're just going to have to go to A.J. to get him on. And you've got the state representative from up north. She's taking a break from the legislature this week to campaign. So how do you see this playing out as the legislative session percolates? What does this mean for folks that are campaigning for governor, which, again, you were part of the last time around?
You bet. And, AJ is very amenable. And that is interesting that Representative Jordan is Paulette is stepping away. That's a bit unusual. A lot going on. What it's coming down to me, is some of what I've kind of seen, and that is that, the Ahlquist campaign is definitely continuing to pour on the money. They're definitely continuing to get out and meet people. That is the critical thing to do. They obviously need to do that. They need to continue to do that. My one criticism of them has been that they did not shift to a more endorsement-based strategy when they got like the Lorna Finmans and others, that they should have been thinking about, okay, what kind of endorsements can we bring in? That's the one thing I think they kind of failed to do. They should try to grab influential people around the state to demonstrate. that gives him that kind of credential because he is new to politics. The other thing is making mistakes. You know, if you're going to cut $100 million, don't come back later on and say, I'm just going to kind of shift the deck chairs around. I'm just going to reallocate it where it's more efficient. You're going to cut $100 million, you stick to it. And those are mistakes. And, you know, a lot of good people over there, don't get me wrong, but those are mistakes. You got to stick to your position, no matter what. That's so I would argue that they kind of could build the momentum, but then they kind of, you know, make some mistakes and that trips them up a little bit. The Labrador folks, obviously name recognition, powerful. North Idaho, very strong. The question, though, is Twin Falls in the east. And that's where a little bit Tommy, but mainly Brad, mainly the lieutenant governor, who, you know, has been around the state, has been out there. I've never been a person looking at the Little campaign that says him sitting in as governor. I've kind of taken your position where, number one, it's a little bit of a slight to Governor Otter, but to say that, to kind of be like, when are we going to push him out? I agree with that. I think that's a little bit of a slight. But also I think that the Little campaign, I don't think they get a lot from him sitting in as governor. I think it's getting out and meeting people. So the more they can do that, and I would argue stepping it up, would be good for them.
Steve Ackerman joining us now here at KIDO Talk Radio. Going back to Dr. Ahlquist, though, that's a brilliant point, and maybe we'll see that. Obviously, we'll see the lieutenant governor being endorsed by the governor on television and radio. But yep. I could see that. You could see that with Congressman Labrador, Ted Cruz cutting a spot, other conservatives in and around the state. Mm-hmm. And then if you're Dr. Ahlquist, well, you've got Mayor Tammy in Meridian. You've got, Kristen Armstrong. And maybe we'll see that. Maybe you've let the cat out of the bag early. But I think, again, it's going to be ramped up, and I love how we'll be playing the surrogate game. Now, again, full disclosure, you are continuing to work for Russ Fulcher, state senator who is campaigning for Congress, the first CD. So, again, we want to make sure that, again, we have full disclosure here. So how do you see this race going if you can be objective, which I know you can't?
That's right. Well, it's fight for every vote, and obviously we've got a good field of candidates. People certainly have plenty of choice, which is always good. It's always good for the voters to have choice. So the perspective there is get out and meet. He's in North Idaho. There's going to be a candidate forum. They're all. I don't know if they're all going to be there at a candidate forum this coming Sunday, but there's a candidate forum for the different competitors. And the key is everybody getting out to meet as many people in as many places as you can. The first CD, 19 counties. It's a big congressional district. Canada to Nevada, and we're looking at a big piece of land. And but that's what you got to do. And so it comes down to fighting for every vote and and giving people a lot of history. You all had a clip on about as Idaho becoming a California. And one of the references of that big population coming in, well, that population coming in, they don't have a lot of history. They don't know what different candidates did. They don't know that a David Leroy was an attorney general, or that Russ cut the grocery tax, or that Luke Malik, how long he's been in the legislature, et cetera. They don't know what all these different players have done, and so it's critical to get out there and meet with the voters. It's really kind of old-fashioned way of approaching people. But people in Idaho, they want to meet you. They've got a little bit of that New Hampshire view. They want to meet you. And you got to go to them and demonstrate, why you can earn their vote. And that's the attitude you have to take.
Finally, the most unusual campaign stop, or let's say most unique. How about that?
You bet. Most unique campaign stop. You mean currently, or do you mean?
We can be diplomatic. In the last 6 or 8 years you've been on the road.
Well, I would say that the most unique one is that Russ broke schedule, and he spent some time in Oneida County, and he met with some folks in a home. They kind of pulled it all together at the last minute, and it's kind of like all these strangers coming into a person's home, and They were very like, oh, we're trying to pull all this together. We're sorry it's not perfect. And he's like, this is great. This is great. And he spent a ton of time there, and it was, he was on a breakneck schedule, and he ended up winning Oneida County. And, obviously you do the phone calls and all that to it, but he's like, I'm convinced the fact that I stopped there, I spent time, I visited people, around the area, around the home, and just kind of spent that extra time.
Here I thought we were going to talk about some unusual local customs somewhere, but Steve Ackerman, we always appreciate you. Thank you for getting up early and starting our day the right way.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for all you do, my friend.
All right. God bless our great friend Steve Ackerman. Kevin Miller in the morning. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Switching gears, the NFL, their ratings are down, and now they've decided to say no to veterans. We'll give you the story next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
The fans who will be filling U.S. Bank Stadium in 2 weeks are the people AmVets wanted to reach with this ad. Not necessarily Eagles and Patriot fans, but those at the largest NFL event.
And it was just us letting them know that we as an organization prefer for people to stand. We're asking them respectfully to do so.
Joseph Chinelli, executive director of AmVets and a Rochester native, says the NFL approached them to put the $30,000 ad in the program that they ended up rejecting.
We actually have been a little self-critical. Anything that goes out with an investment of that size, our entire team looks at it. And, some of our team thought maybe we weren't quite bold enough in this and that we could take the NFL task for allowing this. But the prevailing opinion here was that's not what we wanted. We wanted just a simple, straightforward message, and we were surprised the NFL rejected that.
Hours ago, AmVets sent this letter to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell saying the ad was not a demand or judgment on those who choose to kneel during the national anthem, rather a polite request. Quote, freedom of speech works both ways. We respect the rights of those who choose to protest, as these rights are precisely what our members have fought and in many cases died for.
There we have it, the story from AmVets. KIDO Talk Radio time is 6:26. I'll break it down for you in a minute with Kevin Miller. So here we have it, the NFL that we've heard for years and years and years, all about the First Amendment, right? Colin Kaepernick, the Dallas Cowboys, the Baltimore Ravens, New England Patriots. Every team in the NFL, they say they have a right to protest the national anthem because America is oppressive. Of course, that's what I love to hear. People that are making millions of dollars playing a kids game really spouting off on how bad the country is. Now, the NFL ratings have been down. We'll get to that story coming up in the next half hour. But here you have, and basically it was a hashtag please stand. That's what the ad said in the NFL program that will be in the Super Bowl. But the NFL, the purveyor of the First Amendment when it comes to its players. And by the way, NBC News, home of the debunked Matt Lauer and Lester Holt and Chucky Todd, they say they're going to focus in on players that are kneeling during the national anthem or that are turning their back or whatever. I guess NBC does not love America, in my opinion. However, here you have a veterans group, AmVets, with a hashtag please stand. It's offensive for you to disrespect the United States of America. And the NFL, who has lectured everyone about its players and Colin Kaepernick, showing the hypocrisy of the global conglomerate that the NFL has become. So instead of focusing in on, Whitney Houston, when she sang the national anthem and how beautiful it was, and bringing everybody together, the American people will not have a chance to read this ad. Now, the NFL is a private entity. They can say, well, we don't have to do this. Then where is the consistency when it comes to people in uniform and out of uniform? I can't sit there and protest America at work. I don't know how many people in the private sector can. And the NFL, again says, well, we can't stop it. Yes, you can. The NBA, you can't do it. The utter hypocrisy of this, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Your thoughts on the NFL saying no to the veterans. That's next with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Our time is 6:30. Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. All right, thank you, Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, Kevin Miller in the morning. KIDO Talk Radio. It is 6:35. KIDO Talk Radio, proud of our partnership with Fox News Radio, the only show in the Treasure Valley that will take you live to London to speak with our own Simon Owen of Fox News Radio with the very latest. Simon, good morning.
Morning, Kevin.
Boy, before we start talking about Syria and Russia and Rex Tillerson, are folks over there getting pumped up for the Winter Olympics? It's very big here in Idaho.
I'm sure it is, and the short answer, certainly here in Britain, is not really. Britain has scooped a few medals in the Winter Olympics in recent games as more investment has come into it, but the weather here just isn't extreme enough. It's just not a big deal when it's on the TV. The Summer Olympics is huge. Almost the country stops, it seems, for some events, but Winter Olympics, not so much. There will be niche interest, and it will be findable on TV here. But it's not such a big deal for British viewers. Elsewhere in Europe, they're huge on skiing in France and Germany and beyond, and certainly Austria and Switzerland and the colder parts of the continent, absolutely. But here in Britain, not a big deal, I'm afraid.
Speaking of a big deal, you've got our Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, saying that Russia is ultimately to blame for any use of chemical weapons in Syria. Are people shocked by that?
Well, I mean, the Russians aren't happy about it, put it that way. We're told, actually, just in the last few minutes, we've heard that Secretary Tillerson has been on the phone to his Russian counterpart, the Russian foreign minister, not sure who called who. We don't have any details about what they discussed, though, but presumably came up in some form or another. Secretary Tillerson was in Paris yesterday. There was a meeting going on about combating the use of chemical weapons, and there's a new pact that a number of countries, a couple of dozen countries, have signed up to, including the United States. And he was commenting on the latest claim of chemical weapons being used by the Syrian government on its own people. 7 years or so into that war now, and there have been more allegations this week. It's an issue that has repeatedly impacted U.S. politics. President Obama talked about chemical weapons, said that would have been a red line back in 2012. But then when there was a massive chemical weapons attack that same year, the U.S. did not launch military action. Then more recently, last April, another claim of a deadly chemical attack, and the U.S. responded on that occasion with a cruise missile strike authorized by that point by President Trump. This latest allegation is on a smaller scale, and indeed there are claims of hundreds of these chemical weapons attacks, or certainly well over 100 in Syria in recent years, so it's not necessarily massively unusual. They don't all lead to talk of missile strikes and that sort of thing. But in this instance, they're talking about an area known as Eastern Ghouta, near the capital Damascus, and activists say around 20 civilians were impacted, mainly with things like breathing problems, and they say that many of those 20 are children. The allegation is that this was Syria going after a rebel-held area and therefore gassing its own people. Again, Syria is denying that. But what the Secretary of State has said is that, in his words, Russia ultimately bears responsibility for those victims. Essentially what he's saying is that Russia has failed to rein in its ally, the Syrian president.
Indeed, of course, Syria really off the back burner until now. Finally, what is the state, what is the view over there of the U.S.-Russian relations?
I think there's been a bit of concern, or certainly when President Trump took office, there was a bit of concern in many European capitals, certainly in Paris, Berlin and London, the kind of diplomatic heavyweights of Europe, that this was something where President Putin was essentially going to be let off the hook. And at that stage, it was still concerns about the intervention in Ukraine and also the situation in Syria and the way Russia has gone about its military activities backing up the Syrian president. And President Trump had a lot of warm words to say about President Putin, and indeed even when they've met since President Trump has taken office, he's had some pretty warm words to say about the Russians, and I think that has probably made a few European heads of government a bit uncomfortable. Saying that, other senior members of the Trump administration, Secretary Tillerson for one, Defense Secretary Mattis is another, have used pretty strong words to continue to criticize Russia. Also at the UN, the ambassador there, Nikki Haley, the US criticism of Russia at that level has been pretty severe still, and it's kind of carried on where it left off with the Obama administration. So there's a bit of confusion in the sense of the disconnect between some of the things that President Trump says and then what many of his top officials say. But I think ultimately, in terms of actions that have been taken, I think the Europeans will have been fairly reassured a year into the Trump presidency that actually America is still acting vaguely in concert with Europe on Russia. There's been no drastic step back on sanctions against the Russian economy and that sort of thing. So they may have been uneasy at first, but I think the way things have gone so far, those concerns, for now at least, have probably abated.
Simon, thank you very much. I'll be cheering on the toboggans, but I guess you've got other things to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Our great friend Simon Owen, exclusively here at KIDO Talk Radio, where we go live to London, to Washington, all over the world, giving you the stories that matter to you. And look, the Super Bowl just around the corner, and we've been discussing this at 580-5436. 580-KIDO.
It's sad that it's now become too political or too controversial to ask Americans to stand for the American flag. That used to be a given. That used to be something that all Americans were proud to do, regardless of political affiliation, race, gender. That used to be a given, and now it's not. And we have the NFL in part to thank for that. And when they say that they don't want this game to be too political, are you kidding me? What have they done for the last 2 seasons? They've bent over backwards for activist groups and spit in the face of patriotic Americans, veterans, and our military. And now they don't want to be too political? Give me a break.
There we have it. Tommy Lahorn from the big Fox and Friends talking about this, how hypocritical the NFL is. If you don't know, the NFL has decided not to allow the group AmVets to put an ad in the program, in the NFL Super Bowl program, that says hashtag please stand. By the way, hello to my mom who's listening as always. She said, poor old Tim Tebow. And what crime did Tim Tebow have? Well, he was a bad quarterback. Really? Worse than Case Keenum? Worse than others? No, he loved God and prayed. Remember, we couldn't have prayer in the NFL, but we can have protest. So if you're just tuning in at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, you've got this group of NFL executives deciding that they don't want this ad in a Super Bowl program from a veterans group. Now, remember, we wouldn't have our freedoms if it weren't for the veterans. For me personally, we've talked about this before. I don't think that you have the right to protest when you're working for someone in a uniform or without a uniform. You know, like when you go into the workplace, some places you can't carry guns. Just their corporate policy. You can't protest the flag. Well, it's the First Amendment. The First Amendment is limited in a few things. And by the way, it's having an impact on the NFL championship ratings.
More than 40 million people watched the AFC and NFC title games, but the ratings are still down from last year. According to Nielsen, the average of 43.2 million who watched the games is down 8% from the over 47 million who watched the conference championships last year. Despite the dip, the NFL seeing it as a positive, especially after a 16% slump in audience size year over year for the division round the weekend prior. The AFC championship drawing in more viewers on CBS than the NFC title game on Fox. 44 million averaged to 42 million after seeing viewership erode all year long. The NFL is anxious for a touchdown celebration with the Super Bowl on February 4th. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
KIDO Talk Radio, you can't tell the American public, you can't tell people, bottom line, bright lights, big city, that the politicization, I struggle with that, I'm sorry, of the NFL has not impacted the ratings. And here you have a group of veterans going to pay big money, no veterans discount for you guys. All of a sudden, the text hashtag please stand is not acceptable. You're injecting politics into the NFL. Well, hasn't the NFL injected enough politics into itself? Think about that for a minute. By the way, people are buzzing out of Washington, D.C.
President Trump taking to Twitter about missing texts between FBI agent Peter Strzok and lawyer Lisa Page, who had criticized the president when he was still a candidate. He tweeted, "Where are the 50,000 important text messages between FBI lovers Lisa Page and Peter Strzok?" Blaming Samsung. And now Republican Senator Ron...
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt Jill Nato there, but That was fun. That was a good line by the president. Was it lawyer lovers and blaming Samsung? That was pretty good.
Ron Johnson telling Fox News there were many FBI staffers biased against the president.
We have an informant that's talking about a group that were holding secret meetings off-site.
The ranking Democrat on the Senate Intel Committee, Mark Warner, has been telling some media outlets he still has faith in the FBI. Strzok and Page were briefly assigned to work with special counsel Robert Mueller on the Russia probe. In Washington, Jill Nato, Fox News.
Amazing. By the way, the collusion between the accusations of collusion within elements of the FBI during the campaign continue to grow louder, coming up jaw-dropping evidence concerning Strzok and Page, lovers outside of marriage, and all of a sudden being exposed. Now, again, I expect this from the Clintons and anybody who's ever dealt with law enforcement, and I love law enforcement. I pray every night that I will never be in trouble. I'm one of those little sissy people that I drive the speed limit most of the time. I do my very best because I don't want to go to the popo. I don't want to go to jail. I have a healthy fear of law enforcement. I have a healthy fear of consequences. But can you believe this? Anybody who's dealt with law enforcement, who has dealt with civil litigation, or who has ever been in trouble, who's ever gotten a ticket, well, it's always the burden of the proof. It comes from what? The prosecution. And the highest levels of law enforcement in the country are what? The FBI. Not everybody can get into the FBI. There's no logical explanation that they have 5 months of missing messages of text between two lovers that has gone missing. It just doesn't seem plausible, does it? More on that in a minute. Let's go to Liberal Steve with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Liberal Steve.
Good morning, Mr. Java Man. You had a couple hits there of coffee yet this morning. You sound a little wound up.
Just loving America, sir.
As you should. And leave the football games alone. So it went from 43 million watching it to 40 million watching it. You know, it's such a joke. The whole thing's such a joke. It's like the Roman days, the gladiators out there in the middle of the field killing each other, and the crowd roaring and thumbs up and thumbs down, rooting for the underdog, like the Eagles. But anyway, that being said, I don't think we need to be concerned with whether the AM vets were able to get anything on the brochure or whatever. It doesn't matter. Nobody else's business but the NFL. And the game, come on. And why do you have to tell adults? Put something on a program.
How hypocritical is it of the NFL to sit there and talk about the First Amendment and then to deny advertising to a veterans group because they're just asking the NFL overpaid athletes to be responsible?
Why should they need to even play with that? I mean, adults don't need to be told to stand for something that they either want to stand for or don't want to stand for. So why do you have to put a little suggestion on a brochure? Come on.
It's their money. They should be able to do with it what they want.
And it's their corporation, and they should be able to tell them yes or no.
Well, shouldn't they be consistent then?
No. They don't have to be. They're a corporation. Like any corporation, none of them are consistent.
I see.
Come on. I mean, it's getting out of control with this.
It's getting out of control.
One against the other.
Well, maybe when
Kelly?
people, only 20 million people watch the NFL, maybe they'll get the message then.
What about Megyn Kelly?
What
Not
about
going
Megyn
on
Kelly?
the air yesterday? Will she be out? Well, didn't you hear her diatribe on Jane Fonda?
I did. I heard about it.
Oh, you didn't watch it?
No.
She took airtime to slam Jane Fonda because she had Jane Fonda and Robert Redford on, and they were supposed to be talking about the movie, and then she went to her plastic surgery, and then she went, and Jane Fonda said, I didn't know this was about my plastic surgery. I thought this was about a movie, and blah, blah, blah. And then she takes 5 minutes at the end of the show to slam Jane Hanoi Hilton or whatever she was back then. And
what does this have to do with the Super Bowl? Thank you, Liberal Steve. Coming up next, much more on the FBI text. Do you believe there's a smoking gun? Is it time for another special prosecutor? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And coming up, former state senator Nicole Lefebvre will join us next hour to talk about the Women's March. Taking your phone calls now on the declassified FISA memo at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Is it time for another special prosecutor? Hank, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
No doubt about it. There should be another special prosecutor. And one of the people that needs to be investigated eventually on this is the other special prosecutor, Mr. Mueller. That shows you how crazy things are getting. But the point I was going to raise the most is it's very frightening and has implications just beyond this scandal, that when your chief law enforcement agency of the federal government is breaking the law, this is not an ordinary agent. This is the guy that was the head of counterintelligence in the FBI, Mr. Strobe, is breaking the law, then you've got problems. This means KGB stuff, NKVD stuff. In other words, the FBI acting as a secret police. Your republic falls if your law enforcement agencies decide to determine who's going to be the president of the United States. They don't have the right to become the Praetorian Guard. In other words, all along ancient Rome, when the Praetorian Guard decided who was going to be emperor. And if I was the Speaker of the House and I was dealing with the committees involved, I would insist that Mr. Strobe be cited for, if he doesn't come up with these texts, he be cited for contempt of Congress, and I would go to the President of the United States and insist on Mr. Strobe's prosecution for this. In other words, he needs to go to jail. This has been going on since the Clintons. Nobody goes to jail for this behavior, and all it does is encourage more law breaking. Somebody has to go to jail for this.
Hank, thanks for the call. KIDO Talk Radio time is 6:55. Time for traffic.
Said from the beginning that there was a brazen plot to illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton, and if she didn't win the election, to then frame Donald Trump with a falsely created crime. Everything that we have seen from these texts and from all the facts developing shows that the FBI and senior DOJ officials conspired to violate the law and to deny Donald Trump his civil rights.
What would be the motive for that?
The motive would be that they didn't like Donald Trump. They didn't think he was fit to be president, and they were going to do everything within their power to exonerate Hillary Clinton, and if she lost, to frame Donald Trump with a false crime because they didn't think he should be president.
What do you make of the claim that 5 months of text messages between Strzok and Lisa Page have somehow disappeared, as Lois Lerner's emails did, as Hillary Clinton's emails did?
Well, as an old United States attorney who has watched obstruction of justice over the years, that explanation from the Bureau is ludicrous. Those texts were either purposely destroyed, period. They were purposely destroyed. Moreover, they exist somewhere. I can assure you the NSA has them. Other companies have them. Verizon has them, AT&T. And if the Bureau can't figure out how to get them, they're in worse shape than I thought they were.
There you have it, Joe DiGenevo, who you catch with Sean Hannity last night, with our friend Tucker Carlson breaking this down. And by the way, Peter Strzok, it was revealed in another deleted email, didn't believe that there was anything to this investigation of Trump. We'll share that with you coming up. But really, we have this stuff revealed. And does anybody really believe? And again, this is a tough one for the FBI. The highest standards in law enforcement, not only in the country, but in the world, that we have these two characters out of Days of Our Lives having an affair, bad-mouthing a person that they were investigating, having a bias towards another candidate, now all of a sudden losing 5 months of text messages. Look, the NSA can tell you what you bought at Albertsons last night. Surely they have those things. Verizon has those things. And for the Bureau to try and say something with a straight face, come on, guys. That is crazy. That is just absurd. And then on the other hand, you have Robert Mueller, the former FBI director, grilling Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, members of the cabinet, having the audacity now to go after the president. It's a political witch hunt. It's huge, huge. Fox News is next. Then we talk to Nicole Lefevre. We'll talk a little bit about the Women's March and what I missed about it. Good morning.